have it on today.
Could you introduce yourself? Okay, yeah. I don't know.
Experience. And this is just taking pictures.
We'll go and sit over here then.
Alright, sounds great.
Yeah.
And these are the people that we went overseas with on March of 1943. March of 1944. And we went to England and we were stationed outside, I forgot the name of the area, but it was just off the Welsh border. And for 3 months we trained there. We were closed up into a, we were quarantined, so to speak, and we couldn't get out to go to various towns of England or anything like that. And we stayed there for 3 months training invasion tactics. And then on June the 4th, we drove out of there overnight in closed vehicles to the coast, loaded up on assault vessels, and I have pictures of that too, in which we were told we were going to hit the beach of Normandy on the 5th of June. We got halfway across the channel when they called it off because the water and everything else was so rough that Eisenhower delayed it for 24 hours. We couldn't get off the boat. We were locked down in the hold. And imagine with 1,000 men down in the hold and vomiting and all the spoil and everything else. But anyway, they told us that we were going to go ahead and hit the beach on the 6th of June, and that our objective was Utah Beach. And then that's when we went in on the 6th. And then from there in, it was a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Well, the first day we hit Utah Beach, we hit it at the wrong spot. We were off the beach area that we were supposed to hit, about a mile, give or take or so, a quarter or whatever. And the general that we were assigned to at that time was the 4th Infantry Division, and my regiment, that from my division, was assigned to guard their left flank. And we went into what they called the marsh area. It was flooded, and basically I can understand why the Germans didn't consider to protect that area, because nobody was going to go through that area, and we just were lucky enough. They had like mounds of dirt that you could ride your vehicles or walk on it and everything else. So we went in about 5 miles, and we told to dig a foxhole, and we were going to be defending that area until the rest of the troops landed. Around midnight of June the 6th, after I had dug my hole and used that little shovel to knock off roots and stuff, and I was just getting ready to lie down when they said, "Okay, everybody up, we're going to move." And we moved from there to the left of the 4th Infantry Division to cover their left flank. And we did it in the dark, had to hold on each other's shoulders to walk on that mound, and if anybody fell, there's not much we could do about it. And we went to the left of the division, 4th Infantry Division, to cover their left flank. And I said, from that moment on, I will not dig another foxhole. And I never did. I used every other means of protecting myself against the bank, under the bushes, or whatever was necessary. But that's the way it goes. I was 22 years old when I hit the beach on June 6th. On July 31st, I was 23, the next month and a half. So it's all part of it. But I try to maintain calmness and not let things bother me, even though I did see a lot of dead and dying.
It's
Cranking?
well, it's one of those places anyway. And we were flying over that place one day, and one of the guys from the back end was sitting up. He was the radio man for this particular flight, and I was on a training mission, and I was teaching all of these guys their different functions and how they work and everything else, and he was sitting right down underneath the opening at the top. The opening was where is normally a gunner on a rotating ring. But he was sitting right down below that, and we went out, when we went over this, there was a big, I can't think of the name of that big crevasse. We flew over the edge of it. When we did, the airplane just went down. And when it did, this kid started up the hole. And I was standing right next to him. Me and another guy standing next to him on the other side just grabbed him by the leg and pulled him back into the airplane. And I said, oh, this gets rough sometimes. I only had to bail out once. That's not bad, really.
Why did you have to bail out?
Well, we just came out of Langley Field, Virginia. We were headed south, and we had a 12-hour flight ahead of us. Training mission, of course. And I was in Boston. And we were flying, we took off out of there, and we had crossed a couple of cities, and then we were headed south, and we were going down so far, and then we were going to turn and fly west for a period, and then come back across the states this way. And we hadn't gone, we just barely got out of the second city that we were over at the time, and it was pretty close to the ocean. And we had turned just to go south a ways, and all of a sudden the outside engine caught fire, and there was actual fire shooting back from the fourth engine over there. So they hit the usual foam to put it out, but the foam didn't work. It just kept on burning. Then we got a little panicky, and the pilots who were sitting up, they were up on the front, two of them, sitting in their skivvies. It was kind of middle of the summer, and I said, this is going to get funny. Because after that first fire, the guy in the right seat, or the co-pilot, he went over there, started opening up boxes and looking inside to see what's going on. And the next thing he knows, that the other engine caught fire. Now we're sitting with two engines on fire, and we're still headed south. And both pilots got both feet on the left wing, on the left pedals, to hold the damn thing level. Because you'd go into a spin that wouldn't quit when you got two engines on fire. And so he held it level like that. Meanwhile, he yelled out to the pilot, he said, hey, you guys get the hell out of this airplane. It's about to blow up on us. So let's get out of here. And he did. And as soon as they were, and hell, I got out and I pulled what do you call it? There's a hole on the side, and there's a catch on it. You just grab it and you pull it in, and then you open it. I have an opening to get out. Well, hell, I had a chest pack on. You just clip it on. You wear these clothes that have these hooks on them there all the time. So you just clip this basket on the front of it, and you get one hand on the throttle. There's a little handhold right here, and you grab it, and then you turn and dive out, which I had to do. But when I reached down the first time to open it, so some of these guys could get out of the back end of the airplane, the ones up front, hell, they were standing by with the pole. There's a pole that you slide down to get to the bottom and then dive out. But when this thing gave way, I fell backwards on the other side, and all these guys came by and all went by me, and I couldn't get up. They were all, every time I get up, somebody would knock me down. And finally, there was nobody coming, and I said, I'm going out of this damn airplane. I went out where they did, and I dove out head first. And I remember distinctly having to start to turn this way. I don't know why. I mean, I just dove out to the front. And it started to turn, and when it did, I saw my shoes leave me. They just flew off like I'd thrown them. And I said, oh, this is going to be fun. Fun now. Yeah. Anyway, I got out of that spin, and I popped the chute immediately because I know I'm far enough on there away from the plane. What this happened was only after he had turned the aircraft toward the water and put it on autopilot, and that's when we left. And the plane went out to sea, and it may be still flying out there. I don't know.
And you landed safe, you got down safe?
Oh yeah, well we landed in a swamp, really. Oh, two of the guys got hurt pretty bad. We had to put them over my shoulder, each other's shoulders. And that two guys with the skivvies on wound up taking their parachute and wrapping it around themselves so they could be not seen the way they were. When we could see a road up in front of us as we were falling to the ground, and actually saw some cars go by. So we said, "Oh man, we're lucky this time, damn lucky." So we got through the swamps wherever they were, and some of them we had to go up this deep, and some not. But we got we all got out of there. We wound up got up to that road, and we stopped there and started thumbing. And then finally a bus came by and picked us all up. I said, "Well, never again. We're going to try something else this time."
We were in Toulon, France, and there was a lot of Germans that were still there and hiding, and they were going around killing the servicemen. And but that was about it. And in Toulon, all the people had left and went up into the mountains to get away from the Germans.
Oh.
And the Germans came in, and they lived in caves and everything else. So when the army finally got the German army out of there, a lot of them stayed behind, and they were going around killing the French and killing the Americans. That was their job. Really, they lived in these caves. They had everything in those caves. They had kitchens and the whole works, bedrooms and all this stuff. We were just informed that they were around, so when we were on guard duty, we had to be extra careful because they spoke French, and you would think they're Frenchmen, and that's how they got into the camps and stuff. They used to go into the camps and even go into the shower line. The Americans didn't know the difference.
But the Navy was going to put on some tests at Bikini at that time. And that's where the bathing suit idea came from, Bikini. And so the Navy was putting a lot of pressure on people to stay in for 6 more months. And they give you a rate and give you more money, and you'd be part of a great historic experiment. And I came awful close, but I had had a bad experience with the bosun's mate first class, and I decided I didn't want to get under anybody's thumb, so I got out of the Navy as soon as I quit.
And there at Omaha Beach was really scary for us because we were all 18 years old, drafted from our high schools, and we didn't know. Loaded aboard some cruisers. They were almost like showboats. They were English, and they took us through the nest of submarines, German submarines, and we thought we'd never get to Liverpool, to our port of arrival, and because there were so many submarines out there that we didn't have a lot of boats, a lot of ships, guardian ships we called them, to depth do the depth explosion. I can't get the exact word right now. We got a lot of submarines turned over, and we got across all the way across without anybody getting injured or hurt, which to me was a miracle. It was a long trip because it was a slow trip, and we were great targets. I fought under two of the well-known generals all the way through, and with good old blood and guts.
I don't suppose you ever heard of General Pat.
Who was the tank general in the upper portion of the war, and we got to know him personally. He made that necessary, and we stayed with him, which was moving us toward the end of the war, until we had finished the Ardennes and the Battle of the Bulge. But it was devastating because they were, you know, there were prisoners in there, and it was well supplied with ammunition and so forth. So it just took a while to get everything separated out and get the people who were imprisoned, if I can put that, free past being riddled to death with bullets, to come loose and to get over to our side. And we didn't see a lot of, our position was on the outside, listening to our officer, and so we didn't see a lot of the results, but we knew it happened because everything, all of a sudden, the enemy we surrendered, and all of a sudden the place was silent, and we all sighed relief because they had the advantage. They were in a protected place where we weren't. And then when we were able to spare, sounds terrible, spare the Germans from being shot down one by one, and the Russians were happy to get rid of them anyway, so we took care of them and put them in prison. And I don't know what happened to them from there. They had a lot of those camps, you know, toward the end of the war. You either were a prisoner of the Germans or a prisoner of Americans and British. But how they were treated after that was a world of difference. You know, they couldn't communicate with a family or do anything like that, and they just about, in some cases, in some of the camps, they just about starved to death. It wasn't planned that way, but they just didn't have the money. You know, they had to get, the money had to go to the troops first to keep them moving. So that's pretty much the story there.
Well, the first Purple Heart, I got a gash in my cheek, and that's when I lost my runner. He lost 3 fingers of his left hand, and I brought him to the aid station, and that's when they told me, Sarge, you got a scratch on your cheek. And what it was, it had cut it, so they had to sew it. And they actually sewed it to put it close together. And they said, now you can go back to battalion and stay a day and then go back to your outfit. And me, and I looked around and I saw all these GIs, some without legs, some with their guts hanging out, some with wounds in their head, arms are gone, and everything. I said, no. I said, take care of them. I'll go back to the outfit. And that was the first time. The second time was an artillery mortar shell hit the road, and I didn't even know that we were pretending that we were going to attack across Normandy about that time. And a mortar shell from the German side hit the middle of the road and scattered debris and everything else. And I didn't know it. By my combat boot, I didn't feel a piece of the shrapnel going through the combat boot into my ankle between the two bones, the main bone, the tibia and the fibula, they call it, and it landed in between, halfway in my leg. And when I went to the first aid station, they says, we can't give you any drugs to put you out or to deaden the pain, so we're going to have to probe for it. So they probed and probed and probed and couldn't find it, couldn't get it out. They found it, but they couldn't get it out. So they said, you're going to Cherbourg, France. We had a hospital. By that time, we had, of course, gone across the peninsula and everything else. This is weeks later. And the doctor there tried, and he gave up after a while. He said, we're going to bandage it, and we hope that that piece of shrapnel will come out. I said, okay. And so they started to send me back 3 days later, and I got to the first replacement depot, where they ship the soldiers to the different areas so they can join their outfit. And while there, one of the doctors checked me out, and he says, who sent you up here? I said, well, the medics down in Cherbourg. And he says, you got a fever of well over 105, 106. I said, well, I don't feel it. He said, let me look in your throat. And my tonsils had swollen to a degree that it was basically choking me, and I didn't know that. So they sent me back, and they took my tonsils out in a dentist chair, reached in and pulled it out. And they tried to give me some water and ice cream. I said, forget it. And then a few days later, I rejoined my outfit. And it was not until just before the bulge. The bulge was in 44, December 44. This was on December 11th. We were cut off. My platoon was cut off, and I only had one gun. The others had gone pulled back in time. And we were in the Sao River Basin in Metz area, in one of the abandoned, or one of the pillboxes that we took from the Germans. And there was some infantrymen with wounded soldiers down in the lower bunker, 2 stories down, in the lower bunker where they were wounded and medics were taking care of them. And I had my machine gun up on top in the trench. So I stayed with them that night, and of course it was in the winter, rainy, misty, cold, and my feet got soaked and everything else. And it was only years later that I found out that my feet had been frozen, which I never knew. But anyway, while we were there, on the 11th to the 13th, on the morning of the 13th, early morning, the Germans attacked. Well, we only had 2 machine guns and a handful of soldiers with wounded down below. And the head man down there, one of the sergeants who had more rank, suggested that we just give up, and hide our valuables and then everything in the bottom of the trunk. We'd dig a trench and we'd put it there and come back after the war. And then somebody else says, no, we'll just fight it out. So we went back up in the morning of the 13th, and they started to come through the mist and everything else. And that's where I mentioned in there that I saw this thing coming through the air, and I said to one of my men, what's that, a Coke bottle? It was a hand grenade, German hand grenade. It came through, landed in the ditch beside 2 of my men and myself. It exploded, and as I turned my head, I got a piece in my jaw. It cut a chunk off my leg, and a piece of shrapnel in my back and split my lip. But it killed the other 2 fellas. It killed them. And that was my 3rd wound. That's the way it went until I got home.
Yeah, well, I can tell you what we did. An interesting experience. We were assigned to a lieutenant, he's an officer, and he was the observer. And when we went out to attack a a situation where the Germans were making progress. Very often, well, I think one particularly, it was in the winter, and the Germans were well covered with white, well, I don't know what you call them, they had white all clothing on over their bodies, so it was hard to see them. We never had anything like that. We were running around in the old olive green stuff, but you couldn't see, hard to see them. Well, our lieutenant found them with his I don't know, it was binoculars. I don't know what, that must have been powerful ones, but he could say, all right, boys, let's get ready. We're going to lop in some smoke shells over there, because he wanted to see movement. And the smoke would, even if they didn't kill anybody, or drive them out of there, would confuse them, and we could see them move. And when that happened, he would give me the fire orders, and then I had a radio, and that was something I had to carry on my back, 30-pound radio, and it looked like a backpack, and so I had to call back to my platoon where the mortar was, and gave them the orders, and then we sat there, and then the mortar was a dangerous thing because you can't hear them. The shells, they don't go, they don't do anything like that. They just, they're off in the air. And those shells would drop. We could see the explosions from where we were. And pretty soon we got the action. And then we really laid it on them with the mortars, put them on. And we had another company that took the responsibility of looking for the runaways, from the situation with the machine guns and bazookas. And pretty soon, that whole German unit melted. I mean, they just couldn't avoid what we were doing, and they were dying, and so they just had to. It was always silent, and we had a scout check that out. The next day, nothing happened, nothing going on. So, though we didn't talk to anybody face to face, we saw the results of that one incident, and we had a lot of those incidents.
They'd come in and they couldn't take off again. They'd land, they'd smash into the gun turret. Yeah, we had one guy, 7 planes in 1 week. Them little fighter planes go over. Didn't have enough power to get back in. They went off the end of the ship in the water, and that was the end of them. And the pilot and all this went right down. Never got out. The torpedo bombers, the TBMs, where her husband flew, them things would float for a while. But these little fighter planes, they went right under. We lost 7 pilots in 1 week in them little ones.
One of the things that really slowed things down there was that it was not only the cold. In that particular battle, most of the men that we lost froze. I mean, they became popsicles. We all did. And so one by one we were sent back offline because we just couldn't walk, hardly. And then the next thing was that the Germans knew all about the tall, evergreen trees. I mean, huge trees in the Ardennes. And that's in upper Belgium, you know, that's all forest. And they knew what they were going to do, how to do what they did was to blast those trees down on us. And we lost a lot of men that way. They were just killed with a tree coming down on them. And there was no point, you know, okay, the guys, we've got to get out of here and start running. Running on what? Frozen feet? You know, see, they knew that territory because they had fought through it and made prisoners, but it was all new to us. But that was probably one of the most, other than San Lo and the Omaha Beach thing, where we lost a good number of our men. There's just no escape. Either the weather would take you, or the falling trees would take you. Sounds crazy, but it's the way it was. Fortunately, they didn't try to set fire to anything. There wasn't any point in it. They didn't have to. And they didn't. If they set fire, then they would have smoke, and if they had smoke, then they couldn't do any more damage. They wouldn't be able to see. So.
And then I remember the poor prisoners of war that they had not been nourished, they had been malnourished for so many years that they went through our chow line, and some of them died by overeating, and they had to put guards on the chow line because the prisoners hadn't eaten in a while, and their stomach couldn't handle that rich diet.
Then when things began to come apart in London, England, and we had to use our country as a means of stopping Hitler from going any further than he had gone. And we were glad to do it, but when we hit Omaha Beach, we wondered what we were doing there. Because already 5,000 men had been killed on that beach. Don't regret a bit of what I experienced during the war, and I'm pleased that I had the privilege of doing it, but I never knew it was going to cost me. And I'm still paying for that in my feet. My feet were frozen in the Ardennes, and had to have them. I was taken offline during a battle, and because I simply could not walk hardly anymore, and I had to get thawed out for about 2 weeks so I could get back online. Omaha Beach, we were not. Omaha Beach was pretty well silenced when we got there. They rustled us quickly off the beach, because we were really right in line of fire. The Germans up on the cliff on the top. And when we got in camp for some time, I'd say it was about 3 or 4 days. It was some time to us because we wanted to get as far away from Omaha Beach as we could. It was really scary for us to begin with, because we've never seen anything, been under any kind of pressure or compression, as I might say, until we were really behind our weapons and moving along at a record pace. It doesn't seem we ever stopped very long. We didn't go camping anywhere. We were constantly on alert, at night and during the day.
I was 22 years old when I hit the beach on June 6th. On July 31st, I was 23, the next month and a half. So it's all part of it. But I try to maintain calmness and not let things bother me, even though I did see a lot of dead and dying. A lot.
So I was a Navy nurse at the Naval Hospital in Oakland, California. And that's where I met my husband, Tom. And that's the beginning. He was a patient in the hospital. The hospital was a receiving hospital for the South Pacific. And that's where he was. His ship was torpedoed and not torpedoed, but it was.
It was torpedoed.
Yeah, I guess it was.
It's in the book, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, I don't want to drag it out too far, but he was a pilot of one of these torpedo bombers, and they had two crews. One, you were scheduled to go out the next day, so you were in the ready room downstairs. It was not his turn to fly the next day, so he was upstairs. But everybody that was downstairs was lost. And he was a good swimmer. He went.
In fact, he saved another guy.
Yeah. So that was really the only reason he survived. Had he been scheduled to fly the next day, he would have gone down with the ship. But that was in the South Pacific, off of Macon Island, and and then they were sent out to wherever they went. That's when, and I was a nurse there, and I happened to meet him, and as a result, I wound up married to him sometime later.
Over the phone from Florida. She was in California, he was in Florida. They got married over the phone.
Well, you didn't have to tell that.
When I graduated from high school, I tried to get into the military because they were talking about going over to Europe, and so I decided I would try to get in, and I went down and tried to sign up, so they gave me some kind of a physical check and said, well, frankly, you can't go because you got 2 hernias. I have one on each side. And I said, oh, boy, this is going to end all my plans, you know. But
How old were you?
at the time, I was 19. And so I decided, oh, well, I did what I could, and I decided, and I had a girlfriend across the street that used to go by every day. I lived up at Carroll Street in Chelsea, Massachusetts, and I saw, I liked this look on this gal, and so finally I got to be friends with her, and I talked her into getting me a job with doing her paper route for her, so I could have an excuse to go in and visit. And this is how I got started anyway, and that's when I actually got married, because I said, hell, I can't go to war with these people because they won't accept me. So I got married. I said, well, I'm all set now. I can do what I want. I just stay around and live life. And then all of a sudden, about 2 months later, they came by and put me in the Army.
We got married while I was in the service with the understanding that my division wasn't going to be going overseas, that we were going to stay there throughout the entire war. And like I said, 2 weeks after we were married, they broke us up, shipped us out.
In Shanghai, I was there about 1.5 years, and I was happy to get out of there. And because I was newly married, and they had me over there. It wasn't such a good experience being away from your loved ones, and you know, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and they just came and went, and you had to accept what it was. And that was your duty. You were defending your country and trying to end the war.
Because of being so close to home the whole time I was there, it was sort of like a regular job. I mean, I was there all week long and had weekends off. Sometimes you worked on Saturday, but usually I had Sunday off. And I'd go into town and go home and visit with my mom and dad. And so it was not much different than going to boarding school, sort of.
But it was in Chicago somewhere. And I went up there, and they would marry people who were eligible, so we say. And so I decided to go ahead and get married. And then the first place I was on the way to at the time was at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And I had to take a train to go out there and brought her with me. And we went out to Missouri, and then when I landed there, I got checked in, and I found out that she was going to be staying in a small hut, actually across the road from where I was at the base. And at Fort Leonard Wood, and she was staying in that little house over there. It's a little shack, really, but they had her in there.
He was his love was flying, and he never did it as a job but he was involved. He was building a plane when he died. He was well along toward building a plane. He'd been working on it a long time. And but flying was his life. And as a civilian, we flew in a small plane all the way to New York once. And I don't know. But
my wife knew how to get around the Greenville area better than me. On weekends, she'd say, "Tony, we're going to go to such and such a place." I said, "Where's that?" But amazing. They were good.
That we were married for how long were we married? 50 years, I guess.
More than that.
I don't know, anyhow. But and we moved here in 1993, and I've been here ever since, and I like it here. But so we met. John and I met. We're members of the same church. I've been a widow for 10 years. His wife died several years ago.
5 years, she'll be 5. She died 5 years in February.
Yeah, and so we met on that honor flight. For World War II veterans, which is what we are.
When we met, the good Lord put us together. And we're happy as can be.
We are not married.
We're not going to get married.
I said I can't afford to marry him. I would lose all of them.
Well, she'd lose her husband's pension. She'd lose her her insurance.
Yeah, so.
We're too old anyways. I've been married 3 times, that's enough.
No, well, but anyhow, yeah, we do have a good life together. He cooks.
She hasn't cooked a meal since I've been here.
Oh, wow.
In 4 years in April.
I think you can't get much better than that.
That is very nice.
No, but
He must be a good cook, too.
He is. Every morning he gets up and cooks breakfast.
I have to make her sit at the table out of my way.
I was ferrying an airplane for some people for a twin-engine aircraft that we were flying right out of Donaldson here. And we flew them over to Europe and delivered a new airplane. We stayed and we landed over there, and we got there in time, just in time to had to land in Rome, which is the closest place we could land into. And while we were there, we blew a tire on that great big old C-124 that I was flying in. And anyway, we had to sit and wait for a while he got a new tire shipped in. There's also a big winery down there. So we had to go into the winery and have a little sip, of course, while we were doing nothing. And I got to see a lot in there. And I never saw anything like it in my life. I'm talking about drums made out of wood and steel beams, bonds around them to hold them together. And it's as high as that building from the floor. Great big thing. And they were full of wine. And I had to do some research on this one. I said, this is hard to believe, because I go around every corner. There was a little cup of wine, and there was a little cup of some other food that the rats liked, and that's what it was for. It was for feeding the rats, to keep them away from the barrels. And I said, they're pretty smart, these guys. They know what they're doing.
Even though you were only 18, you go to the PX, you could buy beer. It was not legal to drink until you were 21 in Kentucky, but on the military reservation, they didn't pay attention to that, so we could buy beer at 18. That was a pretty big deal. We also could buy cigarettes, which we did, and a carton of cigarettes was $2, and that was 20 packs. And now, a single cigarette costs almost $2, I think. We didn't know any better then. But that didn't last forever. I was convinced by my children to stop smoking long ago.
We had people going in there from the Marie Byrd land, which was down on the edge of the Antarctic, on the way up on the north end of Greenville. And I got stuck in a Quonset hut up there for a while. And while I was there, I stayed in this Quonset hut, and that's when, after we had made a delivery from New Zealand, and we landed in McMurdo Sound, right on the edge of this place. And I personally put out some of these drums that we painted black over the white land, which was all white. I mean, white in all directions. Hell, I can remember the time when the blowing snow would last for a week. And the way we went to the toilet, we had a toilet out there that was about a board about this wide and about 10, 12 feet long, and we had holes cut in, and that's where we went to go to the toilet. And we had right behind it, there was a place we called Piss Glacier, because everything went out the back, and it would freeze as it went down the side.
So you were...
Okay, I was in the Navy from February of 1944 to June 6, 1946. And I said that was only a little over 2 years. But I had a very unique experience in that I was assigned to the USS Haven, which was the Navy's very newest hospital ship. We were the first of a class of hospital ships, and we were sent over to Nagasaki after the atom bomb hit. And because this was the second atom bomb hit, and we were on our way to participate in the invasion of Japan, it was the second atom bomb hit, and then the Japanese gave up. Well, when they gave up, there was word of so much suffering and death there that I figured our ship was going to go up and help the Japanese. But we went into Nagasaki and we didn't help the Japanese at all. All we did was help the Allied prisoners who were coming from the prison camps. And so we took care of the people and processed them and got them into new uniforms and fed them, and then we put them aboard our ship. And after we were there for 2 weeks, we took them down to to Okinawa. But before we left, when we were going into Nagasaki, we had heard that it created terrible, terrible destruction. So when we were going into Nagasaki, we were prepared to see an awful lot of destruction. And when we arrived, we saw a few demolished warehouses. We saw a couple of ships that were sunk on the channel going into Nagasaki. But for the most part, we didn't see terrible destruction. And people were asking, where is this terrible destruction? Well, they told us it was on the other side of a big hill, and Nagasaki was built with an industrial plain on one side of a hill, and the main city was built on the other side of the hill where all the businesses were. And on the other side, where the bomb hit, there were factories. And so we didn't see anything but the city limits of Nagasaki. And nobody on our ship or any of the other ships who were with us were allowed to go into the blast area. So we were there for about 2-3 weeks, 2.5 weeks, and taking care of the Japanese, and I got a call to come up to the captain's quarters. Corman Leonard replied to get up to the captain's quarters. So I went up there, and I was wondering what the heck would they be calling me for, just a third-class pharmacist mate. And when I went up, I knocked at the door, and I heard the captain say, "Come in, son." He never called me son before. He never called me anything before. But here he was very kindly welcoming me, and all the ship's medical officers, head of departments, were gathered around him, and Admiral Byrd, Richard E. Byrd, the great Navy explorer, was there. And so the captain says, "Son," he says, "the Admiral would like to examine the dirt in the blast area, and we would like you to get a sample." So I looked around, and it wasn't that he would like us. He was telling me to do that, see, but I knew that. And he said, "There's no danger." I said, "Well, that's good to know to myself, see, but I said, if there's no danger, why aren't you going?" I didn't say that either. I said that in my mind. But anyhow, he went on to say that we have arranged to have a Jeep take you up to the blast area. We have a driver, and so you get a container, bring the captain back some dirt. So I did, and I went aboard this little Jeep and went through the town of Nagasaki, which, as I say, wasn't badly hurt. But we went up this hill, and on the other side of the hill, you could see desolation from where, as far as you could see, everything was destroyed. See? So the driver of the Jeep said, "Okay, buddy, you're on your own." So I felt like asking him in a flippant way if you wanted to come along, but I knew that was worthwhile. So I just took my little Dixie cup like that, and I went down the hill, and there were a bunch of Japanese civilians that were there looking around for whatever they could find, going through the rubble. And they all had surgical masks on. And I thought they knew something I didn't know, so I put my hand over like that, I'm looking around, and I saw a human rib cage. No head, no arms, just the chest with flesh hanging on it. And I knew I had stayed long enough, so I just went over and scooped up some dirt. I went up the hill, got back in the Jeep, went back, and the captain, they took the sample, never said any more about it. They just told me to stay in the shower as long as I wanted. They took my uniform and incinerated it, and they gave me a new
But there was
uniform.
nothing wrong about going.
They gave me a new uniform. So we didn't know anything about radiation at that time, but all my buddies kept kidding me. They said, now your teeth are going to fall out, and your hair will fall out. So every morning for the next month, I got out and I checked my teeth and pulled out my hair. But nothing happened, and that was my unique experience. And with the atom bomb.
One time I was flying across the Atlantic, going right from here, from Greenville. I was headed out to Ascension Island. And Ascension Island was on the way toward Europe. And I was headed that way with a supply of stuff that we were shipping over there. And I'm going along hot, dumb, and happy, and I'm making plots every chance I got. And we were flying along, fat, dumb, and happy. I was right on course, the best I could tell from what I was able to get. And all of a sudden, fire came out of the earth. It came out of the water. I mean to tell you, it was so high I couldn't see the top of it. And there was steam. I don't think it was steam. I think it was a little mixture of steam and fire. But it was going straight up into the sky. I said, well, we can't fly through that mess. I yelled at a pilot, let's turn now. Hard. And he made a 90-degree turn to the left, and the guys downstairs, we had 3 bird colonels down on board of this aircraft with us on this flight. And they all went out to the bottom and looked out the side window to see what was going on. And they could verify the fact. I saw it, right? Fire in the sky. I'd never heard of it. But as I studied the situation later, many years later, I realized that, I've seen fire come out of the ground in a lot of places around this world. Yes, I have.
Volcano.
Oh, yeah, volcanoes, oh, yeah.
And in Scotland, when we went into Scotland, when we went in on Liberty, the kids was on the dock. And you know what they wanted? Gum. They were asking for gum. We used to bring gum in every time we went ashore and give it to the kids. Yeah.
So I felt it was something good, and I felt a real pride in our government, in our country, because of the terrible things Germany had done. And we heard, we had always heard of a second front or a secret weapon. That's Hitler always had a secret weapon. They said, see, when they came out and they said the United States dropped this super powerful bomb, it became clear that we had the secret weapon. Of course, he was trying to get that before us, but we got there first, and it was. I was very, very thankful. I was sure glad that we got it. But I felt like, it's a terrible war where you have to kill so many, hundreds of thousands of people died. Even though they were Japanese, I didn't feel any hatred for the Japanese. I felt kind of, they were our enemies, and the guys in the uniform were our enemies, but I really didn't. So I went to school in Hawaii, you see, with Japanese kids in the 6th and 7th and 8th grade. So I wasn't really hating the Japanese, but I certainly didn't like what they were doing.
And up near close to where we went in, where the Quonset huts were, where we were living, and we spotted all these penguins out there. We said, hey, we got to go see those penguins. We'd never seen one before. So the three of us decided we got to go out and see the penguins. So we just took off and headed for the penguins. We hadn't gone 20 feet when all of a sudden the ground ahead of us burst into the air. Penguins flying all over the place, and they hit the deck, and you could see a penguin run. He wasn't running, he was flipping with his flippers. He hit the deck and was getting out like that, just like. Could he move? Boy, we turned and run like a son. We just about kept ahead of them. But they were headed right for us. I said, wow, I've seen penguins. That's enough for me.
But I was sure then that we were going to help the Jap. And the interesting thing did happen. The day after I got this soil for the Admiral, they took me on a trip. I don't know why or how, but maybe somebody felt, well, he went into there, he deserved to have this trip. But I went on a convoy with a bunch of trucks, and there was a Navy officer who could speak Japanese, and I was in this Jeep with them, and we went into the town of Nagasaki, and their hospitals had been destroyed. And in this case, they had a medical school which was 3 or 4 stories high, and all the windows were blown out, but they were using it for a hospital. But out in the courtyard, they had a big pot, twice the size of this table. And when people would die, they would take the bandages off and put them in the boiling water out there and hang them up, and flies were getting on them. And I thought, oh, that's terrible, these poor people. But we came in and gave them 100 tons of medical supplies, and they had a ceremony and everything. And if for a kid, 18, I was 19 by then, I really thought, this is crazy. You know, that we were killing those people, and now we're trying to keep them alive. You know, and there's sort of it was a strange feeling. And I was also felt very strange about how I got on this, because I had nothing extra to do. You know, why I was, I can't
You were the guinea pig.
50 or 60 years ago. No, I was guinea pig the day before. But not that day. I don't know why they had me there.
While I was in there one day, I was chopping away at some of that ice to get out, because I saw one corner of a bunch of cans of beer sticking out there, and I tried to get it out of the ice. And I finally got it loose, and when I pulled it out, I heard this bling. What the heck's twinging? So I decided to follow the noise, and hell, if I didn't have the edge of a piano sticking out of it, I couldn't believe it. But I chopped away some more, and finally I heard the pings and the pangs, and I said, good Lord, I had to call some help for 2 other guys to come down and help me with it. I couldn't even budge it. But we got this thing out of the ice and pushed it and shoved it and pushed it and jammed it and did everything we could to get it up on the top land. And we get out there, and I had the task, because I happen to have a little kitty bag. And in this kitty bag, I had a tool that had kind of like for tightening things. And I said, whoa, look at this. Now I can tune my piano.
Does not surprise me.
And he was surprised. Hell, I was tickled. I said, you know what I did? I tuned the piano to a guy that had a ukulele up there. He gave me the notes, and I found them. and then tuned them.
Did you play the piano?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we played the piano. Hell, as a matter of fact, the boss of the whole operation down there, he came out with 2 big jugs of wine, and he put them down and he said, "Time for parties." So we did what we could, yeah.
Well, first I went to Fort Thomas, Kentucky, which is up across the river from Cincinnati. And then after being there, that's where I learned about poison ivy, because the first thing they did was to give me a scythe, a sickle and a scythe. I had both. And they said, "You can go out there and cut down all those weeds." So I did, and I didn't know poison ivy from the rear end of a horse. So I cut a lot of poison ivy. And so after several days, I went to the doctor there at Fort Thomas. They took care of it, gave me a lot of calcium, some kind of pink stuff that I used to put all over it. Anyway, it dried up pretty quickly.
And meanwhile, we're just sitting there waiting for the damn blowing snow to stop. But to get to the snow, I mean, anytime you had to go to the toilet, all they had to work from was a big rope about that big around with knots in it, and you walked across to the toilet from note to knot, or from knot to knot, blowing snow or no blowing snow. If you're walking right into the wind, that's the only way to go. You put your cuff up around you like this, and then you let the snow and the blow everything right into your face, because as soon as it gets to your nose, it goes this way. See? You don't sit there and freeze to death.
The thing was, when we went to Sweden, we went down the beach, everybody was in the nude. Yeah. They always
It's almost that bad here.
You know?
Big difference between an army sleeping bag, which was nothing but an old wood bag. I mean, any woman could sit down and make one, then have to go to a factory for it. And it had snap buttons on. But snap buttons aren't worth much because cold air can get through it. And that was our cover for sleep at night. It didn't work.
It was very cold, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it didn't work. And so they didn't have to wake us up when we didn't get a lot of sleep at night. And, but you know, by the grace of God, by His help, we endured all of that nasty stuff.
I'm pleased that somebody is, like you, is interested in because things have moved so fast anymore that we are relics.
And I have never regretted going in the Navy and serving for my country, but you learn so much, and you learn how to live with people. You learn how to take care of yourself. You learn how to make some decisions, not all of them, but you learn how to make decisions that are going to be related to other people. And I had a good experience. And since I wasn't in any of the fighting, except for a little bit in southern France, I felt the Lord took good care of me, because I had very good duty in the Navy. And I would suggest that young fellows coming out of high school should go into service. There's a lot to learn, and you grow up.
Who's that walking around here? Mercy.
But it was really great in being part of a worldwide effort, a countrywide effort you were part of this in a special way. If I had been a civilian, I wouldn't have felt right about it, you know. And I felt a camaraderie with everybody, it seems like, particularly those in service, whether they were in a Navy uniform or Marines or soldiers. We were part of this big effort, and we were, you know, trying to combat evil. So I felt it was something good, and I felt a real pride in our government and our country.